Just want to welcome everybody for coming this afternoon. It's never easy to come to a presentation after lunch. We're normally feeling a little bit sleepy after having a nice meal. But the topic this afternoon is one of great interest. It's one that I see a lot as we do Bible work that impacts a lot of people's lives. And it's one that almost as much as cancer seems to affect people's lives. It's just something that's so common. And I've called the talk this afternoon The Mind Game. We're going to be looking at SSRIs and what they actually are, antidepressants, psychiatric drugs, and just having a look at what are the actual facts that are out there that some of us may know, some of us may not know. My presentations are generally a little bit along the multimedia side, so I'll be showing some video clips. And really my role this afternoon is not to try and convince you or convince anybody about my point of view. It's simply showing you facts and letting you make your own mind up, because there are so many things about the psychiatric industry, about drugs in regards to antidepressants, and we're just not told about them. We just don't know. There's so much that we need to know. So we're also going to be looking at some natural alternatives and having a look at the pharmaceuticals and doctors. They give us drugs at one side, so we're going to look at, are there any natural alternatives to depression and other illnesses that these drugs are being used to treat. Now, a lot of the material we'll be showing is Americanized, so a lot of it comes from America, but a lot of it's still very relevant and applicable to here in Australia, because the situation and the story is quite similar. SSRIs are simply another name for antidepressants. And just before we begin, let's just bow our heads. We'll say a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, wonderful God, we just come before you this afternoon just asking that you teach us and you enlighten us, that we may be able to look at the facts and make an intelligent, wise decision, Lord, on the dangers of some of these drugs. Father, we praise you this afternoon, and may the message come from you. We ask this in your name. Amen. So what are psychiatric drugs? Psychiatric drugs basically are dangerous substances, and at best they only really mask the problem. They've got horrendous side effects, and they generally cause irreversible damage. You'll see there on the screen, it talks about they cause irreversible damage to the brain and to the nervous system. Now, drug users, and when I say drug users, I'm talking about what they call recreational drug users, okay, that have been on drugs, on cocaine, on heroin, on hard drugs, on PCP, and then have suffered bouts of depression and have been prescribed antidepressants, have basically described that the effects are the same. For example, I've spoken to drug users that have taken Paxil, and they say, Paxil's just like being on cocaine, it's just like being on speed. And Dr. Solomon Snyder, in his book, he wrote a book called Drugs and the Brain. And he wrote, the brain chemical that SSRI drugs, or in other words antidepressants, increase is serotonin. And that's the same brain chemical that LSD, PCP and other psychedelic drugs mimic in order to produce the hallucinogenic effect. And remember that psychedelic agents are a class of compounds with no demonstrated therapeutic use. They've got a history of extensive abuse and the ability to provoke psychosis. So basically what he's saying is that antidepressants are basically hallucinogenic drugs. They're absolutely no different to taking LSD or PCP. Now, I've got down here in the bottom of the slide, okay, in 1995, 9 Australian psychiatrists reported that patients had slashed themselves or become preoccupied with violence while on SSRI antidepressants. And it's got a quote there from one of the patients, says, I didn't want to die. I just felt like tearing my flesh to pieces, one patient told the psychiatrist. So what is an SSRI? Let's have a look at what it actually stands for. It stands for Selective Serotonin Reuptake Inhibitor. Now, the main important part there is the word serotonin. Serotonin is simply a chemical which facilitates communication in the brain. And the uses today for SSRI drugs, or the more common uses, are for panic disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, eating disorders, depression, social phobias. So just to make it clear, SSRI drugs, some examples there, I'm sure you've all heard of Prozac, Effexor, Paxil, Zoloft, Luvox, and Ritalin. So whenever you hear the term SSRI or antidepressant, they're really interchangeable. Now, I want to talk about psychiatry in our society, just to touch on that a little bit. And generally we have a problem, and I see a problem here when we talk about psychiatry in the effect of psychiatry argues that mental disorders are a disease. And there's a problem with that statement. I'll repeat that again. Psychiatry argues that mental disorders are a disease. And the problem is simply, yet there has not been one single case, not one single report of these mental diseases that has been scientifically validated. Now, let me give you an example of what I mean there. You think of Parkinson's or cancer. How do you know if you've got cancer? There are generally tests, well-documented, scientific, well-proven tests, whether it be a blood test, a scan of some kind, that can pretty much verify, yes, we see cancer, this person has cancer. And with psychiatry, that seems to be part of the problem because there is not a single scientific test, biological test, no blood test, there's absolutely nothing per se that can show that even one of the diseases, whether it be depression or any other of the phobias that they claim are mental diseases, that has been proven by science. And we're going to see a little bit more about that coming up. What we're told is chemical imbalance. Has everybody heard the term, this person, you have a chemical imbalance, or you're suffering from depression because there's a chemical imbalance in the brain? Something in the brain has gone wrong. So it's a chemical imbalance, and we've got to fix that. We can fix that. We've got drugs that can adjust that. But really, chemical imbalance is a theory. It's not a fact. It's diagnosed by asking a set of questions. Not like cancer, where doctors and specialists will take a blood test or a scan and pretty much confirm you got cancer, you got cancer. Okay, it's not like that. In psychiatry, they ask you a set of questions. And the sad part is, you may only be there for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. They'll ask you a set of questions, boom, they'll give you a diagnosis. You've got ADHD, your child's got to go on Ritalin, or you need to go on Effexor because you're suffering from depression, or from what you're telling the psychiatrist, they'll make a diagnosis. There is no science behind it. Just want to have a look at the slide, just down here. As such, diagnosis of mental illness in the eyes of psychiatrists becomes a completely subjective methodology of diagnosis, therefore prone to human error. And that's where we're seeing a lot of the problems, because drugs are just being subscribed left, right and centre. They're hard drugs, they're damaging drugs that cause permanent damage, and that's why we're seeing a lot of issues with people that are on psychotropic drugs and SSRIs. Just got a slide here, just to reaffirm, that says there is no science, no evidence to show that psychiatric diagnosis of mental illnesses are actually present. And therefore there is no need to prescribe such dangerous drugs to a person in need of emotional support or help. So that's just reiterating what I'm presenting to you. Now you're saying, you're probably thinking at this moment, Angelo, that's all okay, and at this point, that's what you're saying, but we want to see some evidence. We want to see some proof, because you're making some fairly big claims. I just wanted to mention also, 70% of doctors actively prescribe antidepressants in the US. So 70% of all doctors in the US prescribe antidepressants to their patients for one thing or another. So the question then, are there any medical or scientific tests for psychiatric disorders? So I'm up here presenting and saying that mental illnesses cannot be proved by science. So we have to ask, are there any medical or scientific tests? Is there anything out there? There's got to be some kind of scientific validation to psychiatry and prescribing of drugs. Surely there's got to be something. So I'd like to present a video shortly which asks the psychiatrists themselves. Let's find out from psychiatrists by putting them on the spot and saying, is there a scientific test that backs up what you do? Okay, you diagnose people with depression, with ADHD, with all these other supposed mental illnesses. Okay, but how do you do it? What's the scientific proof behind it that shows that there is actually a problem? Now, I'm going to show you a video which runs for 6 minutes. It's from the annual American Psychiatric Association. They have an annual convention where psychiatrists from all over the world gather, and normally it's at conventions like these that they'll discuss their mental illnesses and how things are going, and it's full of psychiatrists. So if you're going to ask psychiatrists questions, that's the opportune place and time to go. But just before we watch the DVD, I just want to ask you, if psychiatry actually works, where are all the cured people? If psychiatry works, where are all the cured people? Do people actually get cured? And the reason why I ask that is because I want you to pay close attention to the end of the video. It's a 6-minute video, and that's the question they ask. They ask 2 questions. The first one, okay, being, the first question being, how do you test? What's the scientific test for validating, for diagnosing that somebody actually has an illness? If someone diagnoses cancer, as I mentioned, you do a scan. What do you guys do? And the second question is, how many patients have you cured?
Psychiatry in all of this time doesn't have one case report of one disease validated, not one. What they do is they meet at the American Psychiatric Association. They meet in the DSM committee, Diagnostic Statistical Manual Committee, and they vote on making new behavioral and emotional disorders, and they vote, and then they start immediately calling them diseases. And they tell people, they tell the public these are diseases. Total fraud, total fraud.
The actual truth about chemical balance is that it's an actual lie. Nobody has yet measured, demonstrated, or created a test to show that somebody has a chemical imbalance in their brain, period.
What the American public should be thinking about is when they or their loved ones or their friends have received a psychiatric diagnosis, they should be asking the doc, geez doc, where's the chemical test for that? Where is the objective test for this? And I guarantee you that they'll be told, we don't have a chemical test for that.
There are no biological tests for any mental illnesses that I'm aware of.
There are not current available tests to verify your diagnosis.
There is no test. There is no specific test to differentiate between, let's say, schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Not a single test.
Yeah, we have not really confirmatory test for the diagnosis.
There is no test, there's no biopsy you can do that says this person is depressed, this person is bipolar.
We don't have anything really currently to identify mental illness per se.
No, there are no specific tests to confirm the diagnosis or show the improvement, like any blood tests or any x-rays or anything like that.
Oh, in my practice I don't do any tests. I just speak with people and listen to them, and then I make a decision in what kind of illness there should be.
We don't really have any specific blood tests or other tests that are definitive for any mental illness whatsoever.
What kind of biological tests do we have available today for detecting mental illnesses?
None.
There is no rational science behind what they think is the cause of these symptoms. The medications that are being given to people are, without exception, introducing chemicals that are altering the brain in ways which can be very damaging. And I'll go a step further and say that in the absence of a proven chemical imbalance for which the medications are, quote, rebalancing or fixing, the medications are in fact toxic.
How many patients have you been able to cure so far?
I would say one.
How many people have I cured? Well, there are no real cures right now in psychiatry.
Yeah. The idea of any, you asked me about the issue about how many people I've cured. I don't know that any of us are ever completely cured of anything.
I have not been able to cure many patients.
I have cured none of my patients.
So you have to ask the classic Roman question, legal question, cui bono, who benefits? The people who make the diagnosis.
Okay, so just want to do a bit of a check to see if it's starting to sink in. So you heard it from psychiatrists themselves. So is there such a thing as a chemical imbalance? And we'll still be seeing some more information. Some of you saying yes, some of you saying no. We've just seen experts, scientists, doctors, psychiatrists themselves say that, well, they can't diagnose. A couple of experts were saying that there's no such thing as a chemical imbalance of the brain that causes mental illness. But once again, my role, I'm just going to present the facts. It's really up to the individual to make up their mind. Now, where I start to have a real big problem, being a father of 3 girls, is with the industry. You remember the gentleman at the end there said, you've got to ask the question, who benefits? Who's benefiting from this? And we know that the pharmaceuticals are a huge $100 billion industry, and the psychiatric drug industry is a huge $100 billion industry. It's actually around the mark of $1/3 trillion. That's how big it is. And so it's a marketing machine. It's all about pushing pills. And we're going to see, I'm going to present facts to you, and I'm going to show you more videos just to show that these pills are very dangerous. And where I have a problem is that targeting adults is one thing, and pushing the pills through adults is one thing, but the big pharmaceuticals have taken a pretty low blow, and that's that they're targeting children. And that's where, personally, I have an issue with the pharmaceuticals and the whole industry and the way it works. If you have a look at, I don't know how clear that is on the screen there, but new warning label, ordered for antidepressants. Children and teens at increased risk for suicide, says the FDA. And we've got a clip it down here that says, the Food and Drug Administration on Friday ordered that all antidepressants carry a black box warning saying that they increase the risk of suicidal thinking and behaviour in children who take these drugs. So it's, the more you look, the more you find this. I encourage you, Google it for yourself. If you're on the internet, jump on the internet and have a look at it for yourself, because you will spend hours trawling through all the articles that report exactly what I'm telling you today. There's another one here, and we'll run through a few of them. 4,000 kids under the age of 10 on mood drugs. This was in the Australian, December last year, so it's quite recent. And it says, unpublished figures show that nearly 4,000 children under the age of 10 were prescribed antidepressants last financial year, including 553 children under 5 and 48 babies. We've got down here, leading paediatrics and psychiatrists can offer no reason why infants would be given the drugs. So they're giving the drugs to the babies, but when you ask them, they can't give you a reason why. Let's have a look. Okay, depression expert Gordon Parker said the numbers were beyond comprehension and urged the federal government and all doctors to be responsible for supplying scripts for young children to justify their actions. Professor Parker, the executive director of the Black Dog Institute, does that say Black Dog? It's a weird name. Black Dog Institute said, at first, Parker, it is beyond comprehension that more than 500 Australian children aged 1 to 5 years have received an antidepressant drug. Front page, Daily Telegraph, last year in May. Toddlers on Ritalin. Toddlers as young as 2 are being diagnosed with ADHD and prescribed drugs, including Ritalin. But hang on, let me ask you, how do you diagnose a 2-year-old for ADHD? Knowing that we've just heard experts say, and the psychiatrists themselves say, there's no test. Does anybody know? Because I don't know. And when you ask them, they don't know. But yet, toddlers as young as 2, and we saw in the previous article, 48 babies have been prescribed Ritalin. And yet the question's asked, how do you diagnose ADHD? There's no test. All it is a convenient guess. They ask you a few questions, they make a guess, they make a value judgment. Yeah, he's got ADHD, Ritalin is what they'll prescribe. Ritalin or dexamethasone. Now, diseases are generally some kind of vitamin or mineral-related deficiency, and that's a fact. For example, I've asked this question before at my talks. Simple example, scurvy is a vitamin deficiency, and does everybody know what vitamin scurvy is a deficiency of? Yeah, vitamin C. Scurvy is simple, and it's been shown, it's in the textbooks, it's a deficiency of vitamin C. We also know about things like pellagra as a deficiency of the B vitamins. Now, ADHD is not a Ritalin deficiency. Are we over-medicating our kids? Another article there in Newsweek. Why are our kids on drugs? Says this article. Now, this article hits a little bit harder because this hits closer to home. This is in the Penrith Press, 2006, and the article asks, why are our kids on drugs? And it reports that in Penrith, 1 child in 25 has been prescribed Ritalin. 1 child, so for every 25 kids in Penrith, one of them's on Ritalin. So the question's being asked, why? Why are our kids on drugs? Has anyone had an experience with doctors pushing ADHD or a diagnosis? Or I don't know if anybody here has been to the doctor or to have a chat to them. Maybe your kid's been drinking a little bit too much fizzy or on sweets and tends to bounce off the walls. I don't know, but has anyone been through the experience of having a child be diagnosed with ADHD? Okay, I can see a few hands. I was at a friend's place last Sabbath, and we were discussing this topic that I was going to speak about and present this afternoon. And it was Tanya Dutlow, and she was telling me a shocking story. And I've asked Tanya if I could put her on the spot and if she could spend a few minutes just retelling her story. And I'd like to ask Tanya to come up about her experience with her son, and she refused the diagnosis and refused to put her son on Ritalin when he was prescribed.
Yeah, like I was saying, I took Marlon into a paediatrician who practices right here in Penrith. He was about 3 years old, and he's actually a well-respected paediatrician who works at Nepean Hospital too. I took him in because Marlon suffers from asthma and he had a few other issues, and Marlon's a very active child. And back then, when he was 3, obviously, he was really, really active. And so I just mentioned it to the doctor, and I was concerned because I've since learned now that Ventolin, in fact, increases the hyperactivity of a child, and I didn't know that. Marlon was having a lot of Ventolin. The doctor did not tell me this at the time. So I went in, and we were just talking about Marlon's asthma, and he noticed how hyper Marlon was. And he said to me, "Oh, would you like me to do a test to check on Marlon?" And I said, "Well, okay." And he basically had a list of 10 questions. He said to me, "I don't want you to think about this. I'm going to fire these questions at you. I just want you to say yes or no. Don't think about it." And he just fired off this list of questions, and I could see where he was going. Basically, the general line of the questions were either he was going to diagnose him as autistic or as having ADHD. I've got a teaching background, and I specialise in special education, so I can confirm what Angelo was just talking about. I've seen what goes on in the schools. I can confirm those statistics. Most children here in this district are on Ritalin. It's very sad. And as he was asking me these questions, I just started laughing. And I said to him, look, you've got to give me time to think about this, because he's only 3 and some of these behaviours are normal. But it was like, no, you've just got to say yes or no. And by the end of it, he just said to me, well, your son does have ADHD. Would you like me to prescribe you Ritalin? Just like that. And if I had said yes, he was quite happy to write me out a prescription that afternoon. And he said to me, you'll find that he will settle down quite nicely after this, and you'll be able to put him to sleep with no problems. And, you know, now, 3 years on, I've learned so much more about health and how we need to address issues like a child's behaviour, like the way Marlon used to be. And I'm just so thankful to God that I did not follow his advice. We have, as a family, changed our diet. We've obviously been more spiritual as well. And it's made such a big difference. And I just praise the Lord that just through a simple change in our diet and relying on God to help us through, to give us wisdom in how to bring our children up, we are able to now control these things. We don't need drugs to do it. So it's just how easy it is for someone who doesn't know to just go, yeah, that'll be good, I'll just sedate my child and I won't worry about it.
So really that just shows, that's just one of many examples that shows the diagnosis, how it works. It's a quick set of questions and they'll make a value judgment and prescribe Ritalin or dexamethasone, which is just as nasty. And I know I've had the privilege of seeing Marlon grow up, and I know you look at him, he's a normal boy. Yet 3 years ago they were trying to put him on ADHD. He does what all young boys like to do, and young boys at that young age are very active. I was very active as a young child also. Now, this was a sad story. Student death turns focus to drug trial recruitment. Student death turns focus to a drug trial recruitment. And the article reads, it's really sad, it reads, Tracy Johnson, 19, committed suicide while participating in a clinical drug trial on the Indiana Bible College campus to earn money for school. The article states that her death is focusing further scrutiny on how researchers, particularly drug companies, recruit participants for trials and how universities regulate them. Her death also has some questioning whether college students, often short on cash, are mature enough to fully understand the risks. This is a profit-making business and pharmaceutical companies are exploiting essentially poor teens, said Vera Sharaf, president of the Alliance for Human Research Protection, which argues against the dangers of antidepressant pills. Kids are risk takers anyway. They don't care about tomorrow, they don't realise what they're doing, and should we allow that to happen? And that's what the article's stating. So, just to put into perspective, young girl, 19, attending college over in America, and the drug companies do a recruitment and say, hey, we got this new wonder drug, would you like to earn some extra cash? And they recruit from the students saying, yeah, I'll give it a go. Under the student doesn't know any better. They think they're doing society a harmless benefit. They think it's harmless. But yet the students or the children go on these hard drugs, and one of the common elements is always suicide. I've personally had friends that have been on antidepressants, and I've been looking at the link, and I don't know whether it's a spiritual link or whether there's something there, but for some reason, the majority, when suicide occurs, the majority, I've noticed, is always hanging. There's a link somewhere between hanging a person committing suicide by hanging and the antidepressants that they're taking. And I'm trying to pinpoint a spiritual element there, because when you look at a lot of the drug users as well that are really heavy into their drugs, they tend to do the same sort of thing. And I've spoken to people that have been on drugs. I've had a lot of friends that have been on hard drugs, and it's sad because these are people that tell you that when they've been on the drugs, they see things, they hallucinate, but they speak with spirits and they talk to demons and they see demons. And yet, when you see the recreational drug, and I hate using that term recreational, but that's what they're called, the hard drugs, cocaine, speed, crystal meth, heroin, and you talk to people that take them on the street, and then You talk to others that have been on antidepressants and you think, it's exactly the same. It's terrible. And you have to ask yourself, really, why? Why are these pills being peddled? Why are we drugging our children? Here's another article, Kitty Prozac, or Kitty Prozac docs took millions from drug makers. And really, I think the photo sums it up. It's not about science, it's about marketing. And marketing in the psychiatric industry is to the tune of $1/3 of $1 trillion. I'm just going to show you another 6-minute DVD, which will just highlight and re-emphasize what I've been speaking about. And once again, I'm presenting this to you, but I want you to hear it from the experts, from the people that are exposing this, and so you can make a valued opinion and an informed decision.
Interest, aches, and pain. I'm always thinking something terrible. Ask your doctor about Effexor XR. Ask your doctor about Cymbalta.
Talk to your doctor about Zoloft.
So talk to your healthcare professional.
Get with your doctor today.
Your doctor. Tell your doctor.
Contact your doctor immediately.
Talk with your doctor.
Over 40 years ago, leading psychiatrists met in Puerto Rico to map out their vision of the future.
We see a developing potential for nearly a total control of human emotional status, mental functioning, and will to act.
Their plan? To create by the year 2000 a range of psychiatric drugs regulating every aspect of human behavior.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with depression and put on Paxil.
ADD, and I was prescribed Ritalin.
General anxiety disorder, prescribed Zoloft.
Bipolar disorder, and I take lithium.
PTSD, Zoloft.
I was on Paxil.
When they placed me on Zoloft.
They gave me Adderall.
I was prescribed Siptamil,
Tegretol,
Lexapro, Depakote,
Stelazine,
Adderall,
Concerta, Orazine,
Prozac,
Lorazepam,
Effexor,
Clonazepam, Ritalin, Dexamphetamine, Paxil,
Cylert,
Prozac,
Adderall, Elavil,
Depakote, Wellbutrin, Seroquel, etc., etc.
100 million people worldwide are on psychiatric drugs. How did this happen? Psychiatrists convinced them they were sick.
They want you to think you're diseased from birth, and that all those experiences of life, childhood and adolescence and teenage years and adulthood and being a senior citizen, that these are all various stages of disease.
Because let's face it, we've all been depressed at one time. We've all been anxious at one time. These are normal emotions that we feel.
Every emotional and spiritual problem is reduced to a label.
And of course, all of those diseases require pharmaceutical treatments. This is big, big business.
While generating a healthy income, claiming to be medical professionals, psychiatrists will freely confess that their profession is devoid of science.
We don't really have any specific blood tests or other tests that are definitive for any mental illness whatsoever.
It would be neat if it would become much more scientific.
Well, if you go to my office and you tell me that you're depressed, there's nothing, and no blood sample or whatever, no tests.
There are not current available tests to verify your diagnosis.
I don't use any tests.
You do not have a test to say, well, this is this disorder and this is the best medication for this disorder.
For many years we thought we had the tests nailed down, but it turned out that they weren't of any value.
If you don't know what's causing the symptoms, then to give somebody something to alleviate the symptoms is close to impossible.
By the time a drug's approved and it hits the general population, we don't know even 50% of the side effects that are involved with that drug.
And these pills cause heart attacks and liver problems and immune system problems and lots of other medical problems. So you're playing with fire.
Every day, psychotropic drugs cause serious adverse reactions. And while psychiatrists and drug companies fully understand the dangers of the drugs they sell, their unsuspecting customers are left to suffer the consequences.
Everything became worse. Each mood swing was worse.
He would have chronic headaches, chronic, nausea, not feeling good.
She was very agitated, very, very jumpy.
She was having horrible hallucinations. Her personality was disintegrating.
Once he started on that drug,
The cloud just stayed over him and stayed over him and stayed over him. It got darker and darker.
He thought there wasn't anything worth living to kill himself. That was not Matthew. That was the drugs.
At least I would like to have said, I love you. I didn't get a chance to do that.
In addition to crippling scores of people daily, every month, psychiatric drugs kill an estimated 3,000. But the human devastation would never have gotten this high if psychiatrists hadn't worked hand in hand with drug companies to promote their drugs to doctors throughout the world. Today, 70% of all psychiatric drugs are prescribed by general physicians. And how was this accomplished? Marketing.
It's about creating a good story that uses science, that convinces a physician to think about writing a prescription.
This is not science. This is incredibly effective marketing. It has nothing to do with science.
They use what I call statistical contortionism. Basically just skew the numbers, make everything look fantastic, you hide the bad numbers.
They're learning every trick in the book. They're evolving into efficient marketing machines, and it's working.
There's definitely an unholy alliance between psychiatry and pharmaceutical sales. That's a marriage made in heaven.
They're like conjoined twins. They're joined at the wallet.
And with 374 mental disorders filling psychiatry's diagnostic manual and more on the way, business is booming. Pharmaceutical companies have expanded their roster of psychotropic drugs from 44 in 1966 to 174 today. The top 5 psychotropic drugs combined gross more money than the gross national product of each of over half the countries on Earth. Altogether, the psychiatric industry rakes in $1/3 of $1 trillion a year. How could this have happened? It's a tale of deception that may be difficult to believe, but fatal to ignore.
So you can see there from the DVD that there's always a bit of a hidden agenda, and really it just comes down to I don't know how many were at the last talk where we spoke about cancer, and we saw that it's the same sort of thing. It comes down to money, and prescribing these drugs make a lot of money. I don't know if you've seen recently in the news, who heard about that monkey, the chimp, Travis, that went open over in America and ripped the lady's face off and absolutely almost pulled this poor lady apart. Did anybody read about that or hear about that? Yeah, it was a terrible disease, and it simply came about that the owner, she'd brought up this monkey since it was, or a chimp, since it was a baby, and it grew to a 200-pound, quite a large, heavy chimp, and he was being a bit active, so she decided to give him Xanax, which is an antidepressant, which is what she was on. And she gave Xanax to the monkey, and he went berserk. A visiting friend that was there, her name was, that's it there, Carla Nash, was attacked by the monkey, and the monkey, I don't want to talk about it too much, just disfigured her. They say they've never seen anything like that, somehow ripped the face off, bit the fingers off, but anyway, it was a horrible story. And once again, just an impact of the result of giving an antidepressant to a monkey. I don't know if you saw this one in the news, I think it was only last week or the week before. A quiet German teenager kills 15 in a school shooting rampage. I don't think I can see the date there. 12th of March. So that was just a few weeks ago. And really, the school shootings, how many of these school shootings have we heard of and have we seen in the news? There have been so many, year after year. There's always a mass murderer and a school shooting that goes on. And every single time when they do the investigation, they find the shooters were on antidepressants. Now, drugs are available for every single type of human emotion. Who likes maths? Who liked maths at school? Okay, who didn't like maths? Okay, another big show of hands for those that didn't like maths. Well, when I grew up, anybody not liking maths was considered normal. Today, it's a disease, and there's a drug for it. Who doesn't like peanut butter? I love peanut butter. I don't know who wouldn't like peanut butter. Peanut butter's wonderful. Not one of the most healthiest foods to eat, so you've got to watch the oils in there. But if you don't like peanut butter and you go see a psychiatrist or a doctor, they will say you have I'll try and pronounce this, arachibutyrophobia, which is the fear of peanut butter sticking to your mouth. What about bald people? Does bald people scare anybody? And I thought I've included this one because I thought it was quite humorous, because they've taken the name of the fear of bald people and they've labelled it a disease, and they've taken it from the Spanish language. Now, I'm of Spanish descent, so I know exactly what that means. Pelado, I used to call my dad pelado. Pelado means baldy in Spanish. They've called the fear of bald people a disease. If you are afraid of bald people, friends, you have a disease, according to the psychiatric industry, and it's called peladophobia. And make no mistake, I kid you not, you Google it. There are centres, there are health treatment centres specifically designed and focused to treating people with peladophobia, the fear of bald people. They will support you. They advertise how they've got all these treatments and these drugs, and they'll give you moral support, and you spend 2 weeks with them. It's almost like a health retreat for treating the fear of bald people. It is incredible. And there's a whole list of these disorders. There's a caffeine disorder, okay? If you have issues with caffeine or you can't give up caffeine, they say you have a disease. Not being able to give up caffeine is absolutely normal. It's a disease. We can treat that. Take this drug. And it's a disorder. We've spoken about mathematics disorder, and there's just so many. There's the fear of gold. I mean, the weirdest, craziest things. They will get together, normally at the annual conventions like you saw, and this is how these drugs come about. They poll all the psychiatrists, you know, and try to get an idea of what are the people that are coming to them afraid of, and they say, well, it must be a disease. Let's all vote. All those in favour that the fear of bald people is a disease, say aye, raise your hands. Seriously, raise a show of hands, and if the majority votes it in, that it is, they feel it's a disease, boom, it goes into the textbook. The textbook's called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Psychiatrists, and the fear of bald people today, amongst the other ones, is a disease, treatable by psychotropic drugs. And that just shows you the focus that the industry really has. The industry is pushed by the big pharmaceuticals, and they are pushed by the pharmaceuticals. Their sales reps are trained to educate doctors on these new diseases, and basically they're coming out with a drug and a disease for every type of normal human behaviour. And it's sad, it's horrible. You look at their disease of at their disease list. I looked at a few. I started at the A's and started laughing. I've listed some of the A's there, started going through. I mean, the fear of flutes, as in the flute you play. The fear of gold. This one really disgusted me. I love garlic, and I do a talk on the wonderful benefits of garlic. Allumophobia is the fear of garlic. Allodoxophobia is the fear of opinions. What's that? Garlic scares off the vampires. Yeah, well, garlic's got a lot of great, wonderful properties. It's probably one I wouldn't want to put to the test, but fear of opinions as well, fear of garlic. It really gets to the point where you've got to ask yourself intelligently. I mean, come on. But it's sad because people are falling for this. I mean, because we don't know. Nobody tells us. Who knew that there was a disease for the fear of bald people or peanut butter? Anybody? No, they don't tell you these things. It's for when the unsuspecting person goes in, if they can trap you and convince you, they will. Just want to touch quickly on electroconvulsive therapy, known as shock treatments. I'm sure everybody's heard of shock treatments. Has anybody not heard of shock treatments? Okay, everybody's heard of shock treatments. Just going to have a look at this slide and read the slide, but very simply, electroshock treatments destroy the mind and can kill you. They're touted by psychiatrists as scientific and therapeutic. Friends, that's a lie. It is not. ECT consists of searing the brain with 180 to 460 volts of electricity, and this causes severe convulsion or a grand malseizure, identical to an epileptic fit. Women and the elderly in particular are psychiatry's principal targets. The death rate among the elderly from ECT is about 1 in every 200. And in 1993, the Texas government reported that 1 in every 197 patients died within 2 weeks of receiving this treatment, receiving electroconvulsive therapy, in other words, shock treatment. Other studies document that electroshock inflicts irreversible brain damage, memory loss and deterioration of intellectual ability. Now, in Australia, just want to give you an Australian statistic for that. In Australia, during 2004 and 2005, almost 16,000 treatments of electroshock treatment were given to people of various age groups. So if you think it's gone, it's not. Electroshock treatment first surfaced in the 1930s. It was used as a form of torture in the wars, not as a form of therapy. By 1955, the psychiatrists and the psychiatric industries got hold of it and started using it as treatment for depression and other mental illnesses. This article says, this was August last year, so it's quite recent. Shock therapy makes a quiet comeback. Just want to see if I can, it's a little bit small to read, but it says, during an ECT treatment, doctors jolt the unconscious patient's brain with an electrical charge which triggers a grand mal seizure. It's considered by many psychiatrists to be the most effective way to treat depression. Let's just stop there. The most effective way to treat depression. How do you diagnose depression from what we've seen? You can't, exactly. There is no diagnosis for depression except asking a few questions from a scientific or a medical point of view. Medically, you cannot diagnose depression, yet it's considered by many psychiatrists electroshock treatment, which used to be used as a form of torture in the 1930s, to be the most effective way to treat depression, especially in patients who haven't responded to antidepressants. So there's the link. If antidepressants aren't working for you, God help you, because the next step they're going to try and do is they're going to try and shock it out of you. And it's horrible because it will cause irreversible brain damage, as we've seen, and is dangerous. It can kill you. As I speak, I'm a Bible worker with the Mission College, and as I speak to many people, as we go door knocking, as we come in contact with people, you talk to them, they open up, they tell you that they're suffering from depression, and I found that Effexor is a very common antidepressant being prescribed in Australia. I don't know why Effexor over the others, Prozac, Luvox or any of the other antidepressants are being prescribed. Just everywhere I go, it's Effexor. Everybody's seems to be on Effexor that says they're depressed. So I thought, I want to find out a little bit more about Effexor. So I went to the web, jumped on the Effexor homepage, and I've got a copy of it here. And I want to read, okay, up here, a little bit about Effexor because it's a bit hard to see. The Effexor XR option. If you're experiencing symptoms of depression, Effexor XR may be an effective option for you. Effexor XR has been proven to treat depression and help keep it from coming back. So here's a drug that supposedly has been proven to treat depression, which I think is a very, very bold claim. Now, I don't know if you can see that slide, but can anyone see, I wish I could enlarge it a bit, see what's wrong with that slide, or something that might stand out. I thought I'd throw the question out, but it's a little bit hard to see. There we go, someone's picked it. The front page of the Effexor home web page, okay, talks about suicidality and the prone to suicidal tendencies that Effexor may cause. I'll just come up here and I'll read it to you because it's a little bit hard to see. The front page of Effexor reads, suicidality and antidepressant drugs. Antidepressants increase the risk compared to the placebo of suicidal thinking and behaviour, that is, suicidality, in children, in teens and young adults. So friends, the drug companies know it themselves. It's been proven, it's been shown, the link is there. We still see every year school shootings. We had another school shooting only a few weeks ago. The suicidality and the tendencies for suicide are long documented. It is no secret. The drug companies themselves know it, and they've put it on their front webpage because they have to. What about Paxil? Paxil is another antidepressant, and that's a question I asked myself. So I thought, if antidepressants in general do that, I guess Paxil's webpage was going to have something too. Sure enough, go to Paxil's webpage. Paxil's one of the, it's probably about number 1, number 2, I think it's after Prozac, number 2, prescribed antidepressant in the US. And I've highlighted it down here. Okay, get back to feeling like you again. And they go on with a bit of a blurb saying how wonderful Paxil is, and if you're depressed or if you've got a bit of anxiety, you should be taking Paxil, and Paxil's the drug for you. Yet if you have a look down here, there's a link. It says FDA press release on antidepressants, May 2, 2007. If you click on that link, it takes you to the official FDA page. The FDA is the Food and Drug Association responsible for regulating all medicines, all pharmaceutical drugs that come on the market. They don't have the resources or the money or the time to test most of the drugs. Generally, they will accept the pharmaceuticals test sheets and whatever tests the pharmaceuticals do on their own drugs. I can't tell you what a comfort that is to me, but they basically say, that's all right, we've tested the drug, it's all right, and I'll go to the FDA, pay millions of dollars, get it approved. And this fact sheet on the FDA that came out on Paxil says, FDA proposes new warnings about suicidal thinking, behaviour in young adults who take antidepressant medications. So there you go, once again, just another example showing that there's a direct link from taking antidepressants and people wanting to commit suicide. We saw it in the video at the beginning, for those of you that were here, of the father. It was horrible. Every time I see that video, it just puts a tear in your eye because it's terrible. It starts with the father just telling you, we're blessed with 7 children. And they go through the days explaining their daughter was feeling a little bit anxious, a little bit of anxiety. They decided to take her to the doctor and he put her on Paxil. And within 2 weeks, she committed suicide. And you heard how they spoke, all the family, all the other 6 siblings spoke how there was just this sudden change in their sister. And eventually, sadly, she committed suicide. So what can you do? I just want to spend a bit of time now having a look, because we've been looking at the psychiatric industry, at psychiatrists, how they diagnose antidepressants. So we've seen that, and I'd like to think that you're starting to formulate in your mind if you're on antidepressants, or if you're suffering from depression or ADHD, or you've got children with ADHD or any other mental illness, we have to ask the question, what can you do? And friends, to put it simply, that there are many ways to address depression naturally. There are so many documented studies. Once again, if you're on the internet, look them up. There are literally thousands of scientific documented studies that show different natural ways, natural herbs, natural substances that can be used to treat all forms of depression, all forms of what are termed mental illnesses. A very common one that I found is St. John's wort. It's a herb, and it's very effective against depression and helping with mood swings and to naturally calming down the nerves and so forth. There's also ginkgo biloba, also known and documented to be very good for depression and assisting with any kind of mental illness that you may have been diagnosed with or a loved one may have been diagnosed with. There's also vitamin and mineral therapy. It's been shown that vitamin and mineral deficiencies due to the diet that we eat and our bodies being devoid in those particular vitamins also can lead to what is termed as mental illnesses, in particular depression, focusing more on depression, ADHD, hyperactivity, The vitamins generally in question are vitamin B6, folic acid, B12 and magnesium. Something else you can do, which is really simple, and that is guard your mind. Okay, be careful what you look at, what you read, what goes in, and you have to guard your mind. Television, somebody suffering from depression should not be watching television. There is so much rubbish on television, it's just not worth it because it will fill your head with junk, it will fill your head with rubbish. So anybody suffering from any kind of anxiety or depression or so-called mental illness, television's not for you. Pull the cable out, throw it away, do what you've got to do, but stay away from it. Watch the news. I'll talk to people, say, and you'll explain this to them, they'll say, oh, but what about the news? I just want to watch the news, keep up. No, there's no good news these days anymore on the news. It's all bad news. Okay, our world is in a terrible state, and if you want to watch the news to keep up, all you're going to get is bombarded with bad news. And really that goes for press media as well. The newspapers, you flick through the newspapers, the majority of it's going to be bad news as well. So if you're wanting to look at natural ways to rid yourself or treat yourself of depression, you've got to guard your mind. Things you watch, things you read, your environment. What do I mean by your environment? I had a friend who's always very anxious and just feeling down all the time, and just speaking to him revealed that, okay, where do you spend most of your time? What are you doing? He's at work, dedicated worker, works hard. I said, tell me a little bit about your work. Where do you work? Who do you associate with? And when he told me, I thought, man, okay, he worked in an environment where everybody cursed, everybody swore, okay, the language that was there, walls were surrounded by the pin-up girls, and you can imagine a whole bunch of guys and pin-up girls all over the walls, the sort of conversations that would come up. All they'd do is drink Coke all day and do their job, but even simple things such as that, your environment, your surroundings. Okay, if you're in an environment that really is not uplifting you, not uplifting Jesus, you've got to question yourself, is it worth me being in that environment? Because it is going to affect you. It'll bring you down. Finally, there are some other things. Aromatherapy, okay, is also been shown to be quite beneficial. Lavender and clary sage. There's also, from memory, frankincense. Are wonderful oils that you can apply to the body, to the face, to inhale, and they're very relaxing, very calming. I know from occasion, from time to time, if I've had a very stressful day or just things in my life are being quite difficult and you're at home and you're just feeling down or you're just feeling stressed, you just think, man, I wish I could just walk away. Okay, I have my little lavender oils, and I don't know what it is with lavender, it's documented, but for me, lavender does the trick. It just relaxes me. We'll diffuse it. We have a little oil air diffuser. We'll diffuse it so the smell goes throughout the room, and it's absolutely beautiful, and especially just before going to sleep, I'm out like a light, and it's wonderful, and it's just so calming and soothing. For those of you that have used lavender and have had experience with lavender, you'll know what I mean. Raw plant-based diet, another very, very powerful tool. In this day and age, our diet, the standard Australian diet, or the SAD diet, is the way we live. Loaded with sugar, loaded with processed carbohydrates. Everything we tend to buy and eat in the supermarkets are full of additives. And once again, it's been very heavily documented that food additives and the food we eat have a direct link to your moods, to how you're going to feel. If your child or your children you find might be very active, and some children are much more active than others, but you've just got to cover as many bases as you can and ask yourself, is it something that they're eating? Is it something that they're taking? I remember my brother-in-law's a naturopath, Nathan, and he was telling me a story how this mother and his child came to him, and she was just saying, I've taken the child to the doctor, they say he's got ADHD, he's hyperactive, he just bounced off the walls, and Nathan was telling me, this child was incredible. The mother's telling him, and this guy's literally, he wouldn't keep still in his office, he's bouncing off the wall, he's knocking things down, he was absolutely hypo. And so Nathan starts asking the mother, okay, so all the usual questions, what are you feeding him? Trying to find out there's something here that the child's been given that is causing this child to be so hypo. And they brought it down, and he tried questioning on everything that he could find. And the mother said, no, we're doing everything right. It seemed they were eating right. She wasn't feeding him too much sugar. And then there was something that triggered, one of the questions triggered, and the word ice block came out. And Nathan said, hang on, so how many ice blocks a day would you think you have? Oh, he gets home from school, and probably within half an hour, an hour, he'd eat 4 to 6 ice blocks. Okay, can you bring me one of the labels next time of one of the ice blocks? Yeah, sure enough. Had a look at the labels, and they saw the sugar content and the additives, and he said, look, try this for a while. I want you to cut the ice blocks. And she was a little bit hesitant because she's saying, oh, it's the only thing that makes him happy. It's the only thing that can calm him down. And he said, no, you've got to do it. Just try it. And sure enough, they came back. She said, it's a miracle. Okay, the child is a new person. He's a new boy. And it was something as simple as that. An absolute overactive, hyperactive child, and all it was, a series every afternoon religiously. The child, within a small period of time, consumed 4 to 6 ice blocks. And it just shows you how important diet is, and that emotional issues, depression, can be linked, and has been shown many times to be linked to diet. So naturally, the best diet to adopt is a raw plant-based diet, where you adopt 80% of the food that you intake, as much as you can, raw, and the other 20% cooked. And if you really want a powerful tool to address depression or any emotional issues, or if you've been labelled as having a mental sickness, the Bible is the best tool for anybody suffering from depression. It's the tool that we use to get close to God. And there are many biblical references to depression. If you have a look at the Bible, okay, the Bible oozes and is full of love, joy, peace, happiness, which is the natural human desire that we have, the way we all want to be. Nobody wants to be stressed. Nobody wants to be under constant depression. And the Bible is the best tool that you can use. Philippians 4:8 in the Bible tells us the things that we should meditate. And it reads, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable. If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. So if there's anybody here that has any of the drugs that we've mentioned because they've been labelled with depression or any other mental illness, I challenge you. If you want to put the Bible to the test, I challenge you, and I guarantee it will change your life. Spend 1 hour every single day for the next 3 months reading the Bible and spending time with God. And I guarantee you it will change your life, and your depression, your mental illness, whatever you may be suffering from, whatever drugs you may be on, that you may be taking that have been prescribed, you will be off them. Your life will be changed, will be for the much better, because you're building that relationship with God. And really, when you break it down to its simplest form, it's as easy as that. Spending 1 hour a day with God, spending 1 hour a day reading the Bible. For those of you that may not be familiar or may not have opened the Bible for many years, okay, I guarantee you, if you try it, put it to the test, because it's not very difficult. It's not hard. 1 hour a day in the Bible, if you're serious about wanting to treat a mental illness, doesn't matter what it is that you may have been diagnosed with, you spend 1 hour a day reading your Bible for 3 months, I guarantee you in 3 months, your mental illness will be gone. The Lord will heal you, and your mind will belong to Him, and so will your heart. So I just want to thank you for this afternoon. That concludes the first part of the talk this afternoon. I hope it's challenged you a bit. As I've said, really, it's just been about presenting facts. You all now have been given a lot of information, and really it comes down to making up your own minds. We're going to have a break for about 10 to 15 minutes. I've got a video that's called The Drugging of Our Children, which is a wonderful documentary on the topic. It really, I guess, slam dunks and drives home everything we've been discussing about. You're going to see the experts, you're going to hear the scientists, you're going to hear cases of children with ADHD, you're going to hear cases of how people have been subjected to these drugs and what these drugs actually can do, because really I just want to sound the warning more than anything. If anybody's on any kind of antidepressant, you need to know the facts. And the second part of this talk will be just watching the DVD and just arming yourself so that when you leave here this afternoon, you will know and you will be fully informed about the dangers of antidepressants and the simplistic nature that it can be treated. 1 hour a day with God, reading your Bible is all it takes. So we'll take a break for about 10-15 minutes and then we'll come back and we'll start the DVD.